My husband bought a new house for us, but when I moved in, I found a photo of another woman labeled Mrs. Carter, and it wasn't me. When Mark said he'd found the house for us, he said it like a promise, all soft and absolutely determined. He invented timelines, weekends of painting, a little garden we'd start together, a place with better light for my late-night drawing. He said the words that make a person breathe out different, calmer, mortgage pre-approval, closing date, keys in hand. After 3 years of apartments that always smelled faintly of the downstairs neighbors cooking and never felt like ours, I let myself believe it. I believed the house before I even saw the floor plan. It was a late summer afternoon when we drove up the maple-lined lane for the first time. The house sat back from the road, its clapboard chewed by sun and the corners softened by time. It had a porch big enough for 2 rocking chairs and a swing that groaned in the breeze. A willow leaned over the backyard, a kind of private thing that felt like an invitation. Mark's cheeks were flushed with that small, contagious pride men get when something they want lines up with something they've managed to snag for you both. This is it, he said, and the way he said it made my chest unclench in a way I didn't know I needed. He kissed me on the top of my head the way someone might mount a flag on a hill, gentle, claiming. I imagined holiday decorations, the cat sunning herself in a bay window, lazy Sunday breakfasts where the toast would inevitably burn. Moving day was a blur of boxes and foam and the mechanical ballet of a furniture delivery crew. Friends brought casseroles and pizza and the kind of help that comes with laugh tracks. Heavy lifting, tearful toasts, too many hugs. We painted the spare bedroom a color that was this close to something brave. I bought new curtains that swayed like justification. Mark was in his element, placing shelves, calibrating where the sofa should sit like a conductor, arranging the opening chord of something hopeful. We split up small tasks with a kind of choreography that made us feel like a team. He assembled the bed in the master while I unpacked the kitchen. At one point, he disappeared into the master closet and emerged 5 minutes later with a box of old photo frames, stacking them neatly on a shelf as if he'd already imagined our faces in them. That night, after the movers left and the boxes became furniture, and the house stopped sounding like a stage set and started sounding like home, we sat on the porch with cheap wine and the hush of cicadas. We spoke in bleary, contented fragments. Funny memory of our first awful couch, future debate over paint swatches, the idiotic domestic poetry of planning to grow basil and not killing it. He told me he wanted to start a small herb patch along the back fence that we could keep bees if I wanted. He looked at me with a comfortable, protective sort of gaze that had over the years carved its way into my bones. I fell asleep to the cadence of his breathing and the feeling of being known, which is why, the next morning when I opened the closet to grab a sweater and saw the photograph, my chest stuttered in a way sleep couldn't explain. It was the kind of thing couples buy in bulk at thrift stores. Frames with little carved roses, glass slightly scratched by age. The picture inside was black and white. A woman on a front porch, sunglasses perched on her head, a broad smile, hair pinned loose as if she'd just laughed at a private joke. She was the kind of woman who could look like warmth in still life. Someone had written on the white margin in a looping hand, Mrs. Carter. My first irrational thought was that it was one of Mark's grandmother's friends. A second, quicker, stranger thought, one that taste buds of alarm tasted sour, was that the woman could be me. But she wasn't. Not exactly. Similar cheekbones maybe, but the smile was practiced in a way mine wasn't. The eyes had a confidence that felt like ownership of whatever space she was in, and someone had already labeled her Mrs. Carter in permanent ink, like a title deed. I carried the frame downstairs like a curious, guilty animal and showed it to him, waiting for the amiable, ordinary answer he always had, that we'd found it at a yard sale, that he'd meant to ask me about it, that his mother had left it in a box. Instead, he took it from me with fingers that trembled the fraction of a second you only notice when you are listening for the truth. Oh, he said, and the syllable slid out flat as if he'd been rehearsing 100 ways to say nothing. That's an old thing. Who is she? I asked, the words tasting like pennies. Mark set the frame on the counter and tried to laugh it away. That same easy deflection that had, in small doses, saved arguments about lost receipts and forgotten dates. It's probably a friend of my mom's, or my aunt's. She liked collecting frames. He pushed the photograph toward the stack of moving detritus like it was both unimportant and embarrassingly personal. Mrs. Carter, I said. That's your name. Why is she labeled that? It looks like she's supposed to be, you know, the wife in the picture. He glanced at the margin, then at me, and the smile he gave was an arrangement of practiced comfort. It's a name from long ago. It might be Mrs. Carter because someone was labeling who lived in that house once. People did that. He reached for the sugar jar and measured something into his coffee, deliberately avoiding my eyes. There's a soft gravity to trust, the way you expect steady things to stay steady. I had married him in the small neighborhood sense of the word, not with a license stamped yet, but with 10 other promises that meant as much to me as any paper contract. So I told myself his answer made sense. I told myself to be practical. I put the frame on the mantle because moving furniture looks like making a life. And in a life, you don't start with accusations. But the frame became one of those things that looks at you from the corner of every room. I'd catch sight of it while I made coffee, while I watered the basil. It felt like someone else had annotated my claim to the place with ink. A seed of unease took root, and as such seeds do, it wanted company. A week later, the seed sprouted. One afternoon, I found Mark in the garage with the hatchback open, searching through a crate of his old boxes. He'd been oddly secretive about some of his things. He called them projects and old plans, and I'd accepted that men sometimes have archives of failed ventures and tinkering. That day, he pulled out a brown leather satchel and, with a swipe of his hand, fished out an envelope thick with age. He looked startled to find it, as if it had been hiding under his life and decided it was time to be visible. What's that? I asked. He blinked, and for the first time since we'd bought the place, Mark looked like a man caught unready. He hesitated. It's paperwork from before we met. Old house stuff, he said. Just junk. I kept watching. Hands become honest in motion, and his fingers trembled as he peeled peeled open the envelope. Sheets of yellowed paper slid out, an old deed perhaps, or correspondence, then a photograph, and then, folded very carefully, a small stack of Polaroids. When he spread them on the workbench, my heart leapt into my throat and refused to come down. There were 5 photos. The first was of the same woman from the closet picture, Mrs. Carter, standing with a man I recognized in a second like a knife. Mark, younger, hair not yet threaded with gray, arm around her waist, both of them laughing like conspirators. In the corner of one photo, a child grinned with a missing tooth. Another picture had the porch again, this time with a small plaque by the door that read Carter House, 1987. On the back of one Polaroid, someone had written, resentful and small, May 1994, last summer. I felt the garage tilt. Explain, I said, too flat for the panic that had bloomed in my chest. Mark swallowed against the back of his throat. He had always been a man of words, of apologies practiced in the quiet before they were needed. Now his voice was small. I told you about, before, a little, there were relationships. People come and go. That was a long, I echoed. She's labeled Mrs. Carter, that's your last name. These are photos of you with her. There's a kid. Where did she go? He flinched as if I'd slapped him. If there is a brutal honesty, it's the sound a man makes when he is cornered by his past. It's complicated, he said. She left. She moved away. We lost touch. And the kid? I asked. His eyes found the grain of the workbench. A neighbor, maybe. That could be anyone's cousin. I don't remember clearly. We were young. You don't remember? The words felt alien on my tongue. The photos were physical proof in a way my gut couldn't dismantle. Why didn't you tell me about her? Why did you hide these here? I gestured at the photos. In this box when you brought them into our house. Because it was in the past, Mark said, finally meeting my eyes. There was that steadying look again, but under it, a nervousness now apparent like a fever. I didn't think it mattered. None of this matters now. We're here. This house is ours. You can debate the plausibility of things in the neat light of lectures and late-night coffee, but when you're standing in the middle of the garage, facing a man who has kept a previous life tucked under his elbow, the debate collapses into something smaller and less rational. Betrayal. Not necessarily infidelity, though the photographs whispered about that possibility, but betrayal in the way of being kept out of someone's hole. People keep secrets for 1,000 reasons, some merciful and some cowardly. His reasons might have been either or both. I wanted to ask the questions that felt like scaffolding for trust. Why didn't you tell me? Who was she really? Was the kid his? Did he move on and forget, or had he erased them? But in the way sorrow often does, shock makes you clumsy. I left the garage with the Polaroids sliding under my hand like evidence I wasn't equipped to process. And I went upstairs where the house hummed like an animal that had been asleep and now had to adjust to a stranger moving in. Over dinner that night, I placed a Polaroid on his place like a soft accusation. There are moments when everything inside you says wait, call a friend, sleep on it, breathe, and moments when life demands a confrontation now. I wanted answers now. Mark stared at the picture for a long time, and the room had shrunken to nothing but his face and the photograph. He set down his fork gently, as if dinner were suddenly fragile to be handled with tools. Her name was Claire, he said finally. Claire Carter. She lived here years ago. We were young and stupid in ways that matter more later than you'd think. She left. I never told anyone because I thought telling would complicate things that were already painful. I thought it was done. Claire Carter? My voice sounded thin. You didn't even say why. He closed his eyes. It was easier to keep that life separate. I wanted this to be just me when we were together. He looked at me then, and for a second his face was the one I fell in love with. The man who said kind things in the middle of ordinary moments. I should have told you. I'm sorry. Words can be sincere and still not bridge the space silence has dug between people. I swallowed the apology because I wanted to hear the rest. What happened to her? She got sick. The word came out small. Impossible. Cancer. They moved away. I heard about it. I went to visit once, but he broke off. His hands, usually so steady, were knuckled so tight I could see the seams of his skin go white. I thought she was getting better. I thought it was in the past. The unconscious memory of his hands around mine that night on the porch pressed against me like a reminder that people are allowed to carry regret without it being forever corrosive. But another thought clawed up through the ash. Why label a photo Mrs. Carter in my new house? If you intended it to be a relic no one would find, why keep a stack of Polaroids in the garage at all? And that label, Mrs. Carter, had the formal public ring to it, like someone was claiming a title that implied the permanence of marriage. Why would someone label it Mrs. Carter if that relationship was over? I asked. He looked at the photo again as if trying to read an answer in the light. People labeled their pictures, he said. Back then, people would write names. I didn't think it was a claim. I thought it was memory. It felt inadequate. Memory had teeth. It could bite. Mark's memory, it seemed, had held more than he let on. And the house, our house, had quietly become a place where his past sat up and spoke in the margins. I wanted to believe his remorse, but the photograph simmered with ambiguity. Under the label, the portrait suggested permanence. Under the permanence, there was a possibility of someone else who had been named first Mrs. Carter, and I had moved in expecting to finish the sentence. That night, I slept poorly. I told myself I was making a mountain out of a Polaroid. I told myself the adult thing to do was to ask more questions, not make accusations. But the house that had felt like an answer all week hummed now with a question I couldn't put down. If he had once loved someone else enough to be in photographs and in print, why did he buy a house and call it For Us without ever telling me that us had a preface? In the dark, with a willow whispering against the window, I imagined Claire's handwriting on the margin, Mrs. Carter, a name like a flag planted in the story of a house that was supposed to be ours. I pictured other things tucked into cardboard boxes in the garage, unsent letters, phone numbers crossed out, maybe a small unmarked urn. The mind is a cartographer of futures in the dark. It draws harbor lines and cliffs with the same indifferent hand. Morning came and Mark made coffee like nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead and called me beautiful in that same ordinary voice. He went to work. I sat at the kitchen table with the Polaroids before me and felt the weight of every small secret. I set the photos down and reached for one more small, brave act. I flipped one Polaroid over again and examined the handwriting. Under Mrs. Carter, in a slanted haste, there was a number, a scribble, a sequence of digits, a phone number someone had written and then, perhaps, walked away from forever. I typed the digits into my phone before I could talk myself out of it. The line rang. The answering service picked up, and a woman's voice, tired and gentle, said, "Carter family voicemail." The hollowness of the recorded voice made my chest tighten. Now, for the first time since the keys were in my hand, the house felt less like a beginning and more like an invitation to an argument I hadn't agreed to have. I put down the phone, flipped the Polaroid back open so I could see the woman's face a little longer, and told myself that mornings come with adult decisions. Call, confront, or learn to live with a not knowing. I called. The line clicked and a tired voice answered. "Hello?" a woman said. And I waited, because once you start pulling a thread, you might as well see how big the sweater unravels. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was thin, hesitant, like someone answering a call they didn't expect to ever come. My throat went dry. I stared at the photo in my hand, the black and white woman smiling on the porch. Mrs. Carter, written beneath her in neat cursive. "Hi," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I found this number written on the back of an old photograph. I think it might belong to the Carter family." A pause. I could hear faint breathing, the rustle of fabric, then cautiously, "Who's calling?" "My name's Aaron," I said, heart pounding. "My fiancé, Mark Carter, and I just moved into a house. I found this picture while unpacking. It says Mrs. Carter on it, and I thought maybe it belonged to someone in your family." Another silence. Longer this time. Then the woman exhaled shakily. "You're living in that house?" Something in her tone, half fear, half disbelief, made the back of my neck prickle. "Yes, we moved in about a week ago." "You need to tell me something," she said abruptly, her voice tightening. "That house, does it still have the blue shutters?" I blinked. "Yes, it does. We were thinking of repainting them soon." She made a sound, almost a laugh, but it broke halfway through. "Don't. Claire loved those damn shutters. She said they looked like the sky trapped itself on the windows." My breath caught. "Claire Carter?" "Yes." The voice softened. "You said your fiancé's name is Mark Carter?" "Right." Another pause. I could hear her shifting on the other end. "Then you must be the new one." "The new one? What do you mean by that?" I asked slowly. But the woman's tone changed, sharpening with something like pity. "Listen, sweetheart, I don't know what he told you, but if you're smart, you'll pack your things and get out of there. That house, that man, they're bad news." My stomach flipped. "Wait, you know him?" "You know Mark?" "Know him?" she said almost bitterly. "I used to be married to his brother." It took me a few seconds to process what she'd just said. I sat there at the kitchen table, sunlight pooling across the photographs, my hand gripping the phone too tight. "His brother?" I repeated. "Yes," the woman said, sighing. "I'm Ann Carter. Or I was, before I took my name back. I knew Claire too. We all did." I swallowed hard. "What happened to her?" Ann didn't answer immediately. "You should really be asking Mark that." "I have," I said. "He said she got sick, that she left." Ann let out a low, humorless laugh. "That's one way to put it." "Please," I said, desperation leaking into my voice. "I need to know. Who was she to him? Why does her picture say Mrs. Carter? Why does it feel like I've moved into someone else's life?" For a moment, all I heard was breathing. Then Ann said softly, "Because you have." My chest tightened. "Claire was his wife," she continued. "They lived in that house. They had a son too, little Benji. He'd be about 10 now if..." She stopped. "If what?" I pressed. "If things hadn't gone the way they did." The way she said it, quiet, careful, made the air around me feel too heavy to breathe. "What happened?" Another pause, longer this time. "You sure you want to know, honey? Some things, once you hear them, you can't unhear." I didn't hesitate. "Tell me." Ann sighed. "It was about 5 years ago. Claire was sick, like Mark told you. Breast cancer. But she was beating it. She was strong. Everyone thought she'd pull through. Then one night, the house caught fire. They said it started in the kitchen. Mark was out running errands." I swallowed hard. "Oh my god." "They found Claire in the bedroom," Ann continued. "She didn't make it. And Benji," her voice cracked, "he was gone too. They said the smoke got him first." My stomach dropped. "And Mark?" "He said he came home to find it already burning. That he tried to get inside, but it was too late. He was treated like a hero for a while. Poor widower, tragic, accident, all that. The insurance paid out. The investigation went cold. He left town a few months later." I couldn't breathe. My Mark, my quiet, careful Mark, standing outside a burning house while his wife and son died inside. It didn't fit. It couldn't. "You're lying," I whispered. I wish I was. Ann's voice was tired now, but not cruel. "Look, I don't know what he told you. Maybe he really did love you. Maybe he's changed. But if you found that picture, then I can tell you one thing for certain. He's not done with her. Not by a long shot." I stared at the photo again. The smile, the handwriting, the words Mrs. Carter. "How do you know all this?" I asked finally. Ann hesitated. "Because I was there the night it happened. I saw him." My heart stuttered. "What do you mean you saw him?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He wasn't outside when the fire started. He was inside." The line went dead. I sat frozen for what felt like hours. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering onto the tile. Inside the kitchen, the refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, the ordinary rhythm of life went on. But something inside me had split clean in two. Mark came home that evening like nothing had happened. He brought takeout, whistling softly, his hair still damp from the shower at the gym. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, setting down the bags. "How was your day?" I stared at him. His eyes were kind, familiar, the same soft gray I'd memorized in every morning light. He looked at me like a man in love, and for a terrifying second, I almost forgot what Ann had said. Almost. "Fine," I lied. "Just unpacking." He smiled. "Good, you'll love dinner. Your favorite." He kissed my forehead and moved around the kitchen, humming as he unpacked boxes. When his back was turned, I looked at the photo again. The woman's face smiled up at me from the counter, the word Mrs. Carter curling under her chin like a claim. And suddenly, I realized something I hadn't noticed before. Behind her, in the photo, on the porch, there was a shape, a faint blur almost hidden in the shadow by the doorway, a child's face, watching. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of the streetlight outside painted the walls in shapes that felt like warnings. At around 2 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen for water. That's when I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway, near the closet where I'd found the photograph. I froze. "Mark?" I whispered. No answer. The air felt suddenly colder, heavier. I stepped toward the sound, barefoot, every step deliberate. The door to the closet was slightly ajar. I reached out, hand trembling, and pulled it open. The light flickered once, then steadied. Inside, the photo of Claire was gone. In its place, taped to the wall, was a new one. Newer, clearer. It was me, standing on the porch, smiling. And underneath, in the same looping handwriting, Mrs. Carter. My knees almost gave out. I stared at the photograph, my photograph, taped neatly inside the closet, the edges curling slightly as if it had been placed there days ago. The same porch, the same railing, the same blue shutters, my same crooked smile. The handwriting beneath it was identical to the one on Claire's photo. Mrs. Carter. It took a moment before I realized I wasn't breathing. The glass of water in my hand slipped, shattering against the floor. "Aaron?" Mark's voice drifted from the bedroom. "Everything okay?" I froze. My mind spun so fast it made my stomach turn. If I told him what I'd found, he'd have a reason ready. He always did. A calm, measured tone. A perfectly believable lie. So I said quietly, "Yeah, just dropped something. Need help?" "No, go back to sleep." My hands shook as I grabbed my phone and snapped a picture of the photograph. I wasn't sure why. Instinct, maybe. Proof. Evidence that I wasn't imagining things. Then I shut the closet door and backed away slowly, heart thundering against my ribs. Back in the bedroom, Mark was already half asleep, one arm flung across the bed, his breathing steady. The picture of domestic calm. I lay beside him, eyes wide open, watching the shadows move across the ceiling. Every time he shifted, my muscles tensed. Every time he breathed, I thought I could smell smoke. By morning, the photograph was gone. I opened the closet again just to be sure, but the wall was bare. No tape, no residue, no sign it had ever been there. When Mark came into the kitchen, smiling like any other day, I studied him the way you study a stranger who might be dangerous. He was wearing a crisp blue shirt, humming under his breath as he poured coffee. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my silence. I nodded. "Did you move anything from the closet last night?" He looked up, eyebrows raised. "Closet? No, why?" "There was a photo," I said, watching his face, "of me. It was taped inside." He frowned, the picture of mild confusion. "You sure? Maybe you dreamed it. You've been exhausted lately." "I didn't dream it, Mark. It was real." He set his mug down gently. "Aaron, you've been through a lot these past few weeks. Moving's stressful. That house was full of junk. Maybe you saw something old and your mind filled in the rest." "I know what I saw," he sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Look, if it's that important, I'll check the closet myself when I get home, okay?" He kissed my forehead and left for work, his cologne trailing behind him, the same scent he'd worn since our first date, the same one I'd always loved. Now it made me nauseous. The minute his car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my keys and the picture I'd taken on my phone. I needed to see it again, to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I drove to the local library where I could use the computer without him knowing. My hands trembled as I opened the image. There it was, me standing on the porch. But when I zoomed in, something caught my eye. The background. In the corner of the photo, through the screen door behind me, was a reflection, faint but unmistakable. A man, standing inside the house, watching me. I nearly dropped the phone. My pulse pounded in my ears, drowning out every rational thought. It could have been an old reflection, a trick of the light. But deep down I knew better. That figure had been standing too close, too deliberate. I scrolled through my photos, looking for when it might have been taken. There was no record, no file timestamp, nothing. It was as if the photo had appeared out of nowhere. My first thought was to call the police. My second was darker. What if Mark was the one who took it? What would I even tell them? That my fiancé might have staged a photograph of me in our house to replace the woman he supposedly lost in a fire? No one would believe that. So instead I drove. I didn't know where exactly, just away. Away from the house, from Mark, from the smell of coffee and paint and carefully constructed normalcy. I ended up in the next town over, sitting in my car outside a small diner. The kind of place where the waitresses call you hon and the coffee is always burnt. I scrolled through my contacts until I found Anne's number, the woman from the phone call. I hit dial. It rang once, twice. Then her voice came through, cautious. "Hello? It's Aaron," I said quickly. "I need to know more." There was a pause. "You shouldn't be calling me. Please." I found another photo of me, labeled the same way as Claire's. Anne inhaled sharply. "Oh, honey, please just tell me everything," I said. "I deserve to know." Another pause. Then she said quietly, "Meet me, but not at your house. There's a park off Route 7 behind the old church. Noon. Don't bring him." "Why?" "Because if he knows you're asking questions, you won't get another chance." The line went dead. I spent the next few hours pacing, waiting, checking the clock every 30 seconds. When the time came, I parked 2 blocks from the church and walked the rest of the way. Anne was already there, sitting on a bench by the pond. She looked older than I'd imagined, early 60s maybe, with kind eyes and the sort of tired grace that comes from carrying too many secrets. "Aaron," she said when she saw me. I nodded. She glanced around before motioning for me to sit. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said softly. "But you deserve the truth." "About what?" "About Mark, about Claire, about what really happened in that house." I leaned forward. "Please." Anne took a deep breath. Claire and Mark's marriage wasn't what it looked like. From the outside, they were perfect. The nice house, the happy family. But Claire was planning to leave him. I blinked. "Why?" "She found out something," Anne said, lowering her voice. "Something about his work, about the money. He wasn't just selling real estate, Aaron. He was part of something darker, something that involved the fires." "The fires?" She nodded grimly. "There were 3 in the county that year. All accidental, all insured for more than they were worth. Every one of them tied back to a development deal in Mark's name." I felt my stomach twist. "You think he caused them?" "I don't think," she said. "I know. Claire found the paperwork." She confronted him. 2 weeks later, the house went up in flames. I stared at her, shaking my head. No, he wouldn't. Anne looked at me sadly. He already did. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. These were sent to me anonymously after the fire. I think Claire meant for me to have them. I hesitated, then took it. Inside were photos, charred around the edges, insurance documents, copies of bank transfers, a single haunting image of Mark standing outside a burned house, flames reflected in his eyes, and then one more photo, newer, printed on glossy paper. It was my house, the same blue shutters, the same porch, only this time the porch was on fire. I looked up at Anne, my voice barely audible. What is this? She held my gaze. It's a warning. From who? From Claire. I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, Anne's expression changed, eyes widening in horror. Aaron, she whispered, don't turn around. But I did. And standing just behind the trees, half hidden by shadow, was Mark, watching us. He was standing 20 yards away, hands in his pockets, head tilted slightly like he'd caught us doing something mildly amusing. The wind picked up, tugging at the hem of his coat. For a heartbeat, the three of us just stared at each other. Me frozen on the bench, Anne gripping her purse like it was a weapon, Mark smiling with that polite, almost apologetic expression he wore whenever he wanted to make something ugly seem manageable. Aaron, he said finally, his voice smooth, even. What are you doing out here? Anne leaned toward me, whispering, he followed you. My pulse was so loud I could barely think. I needed air, I stammered, my voice sounding distant even to myself. Mark's eyes flicked to Anne. You must be the woman from the phone. Anne, right? My sister-in-law. Her jaw tightened. Ex-sister-in-law. He gave a small, almost pitying smile. Of course. I suppose that distinction matters. Stay where you are, Mark, she warned. You don't get to come closer. He laughed softly, not cruelly, but the kind of laugh that says you're being dramatic. Anne, please, I know you've always had a flair for stories, but dragging my fiancé into your obsession is low even for you. My throat closed. Mark, stop. I heard what happened and about the fire. About Claire and Benji. Something flickered across his face. Not grief, not anger. Something harder to name. You shouldn't believe everything you hear, he said quietly. She said you were inside when it started. I pushed. That you caused it. He took a slow step forward, hands raised slightly. Aaron, listen to yourself. Think about what she's doing to you. You've been under stress. Moving, new town, new house. You're seeing things. You told me yourself you thought there was a picture of you in the closet. His tone softened, patient. There wasn't, was there? My mind twisted. I had proof, the photo on my phone. I fumbled to unlock it, but my hands were shaking too much. When I finally got the screen up, the picture was gone. Just a black square where the file had been. Anne saw my face and whispered, he's been in your phone. Mark's smile didn't change. You see? This is what happens when people start spinning stories. The line between memory and paranoia gets blurry. Anne stood. You can gaslight your fiancé all you want, Mark, but I know what you did to Claire. His smile faltered. Be careful with accusations like that. She took a step forward, eyes blazing. I was there the night before the fire. She told me she'd found the insurance papers, that she was going to the police. You begged her not to. And when I came by the next morning, her voice cracked. The house was already burning. Mark's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes hardened. You remember what the coroner said. Accidental electrical fault. I remember the smell of gasoline. Anne snapped. Silence fell. The wind rustled the leaves overhead, whispering through the pines like a warning. Mark looked at me, his voice low. Aaron, come here. I shook my head. No, please, he said. You're scared, I get that. But she's trying to poison you against me. You don't know her. She's been obsessed for years. She blames me for everything that went wrong in her life. Anne snorted. Everything that went wrong in my life burned down because of you. Stop. I shouted, the word tearing out of me. Both of you, just stop. They did. The quiet after was heavier than the argument. I turned to Anne. If everything you're saying is true, why come to me now? Why not go to the police? She looked away. I did. They said there wasn't enough evidence. The investigation's closed. Mark crossed his arms, calm again. See? She's been carrying this story for years. It's sad, really. But then Anne said something that broke whatever fragile calm he'd been pretending to hold. They may not have believed me, she said, her voice steady again, but they believed the DNA test. Mark froze. What are you talking about? I had samples pulled from the old evidence, from the fire debris. There was more than one adult's DNA in that house, Mark. Claire's and yours. He stared at her, speechless, for the first time. Anne turned to me. He was there when it started, Aaron. The only question is why he walked out and they didn't. Mark's eyes found mine again. That's not true. Then explain it, I demanded. Explain why your DNA was there if you were running errands. His mouth opened, then closed. He took another step closer, and Anne reached into her bag, not for a weapon, but for her phone. She lifted it like a threat. I've been recording this whole thing. He stopped. For a long moment, no one moved. Then quietly, Mark said, you shouldn't have done that. He turned and walked away, slowly, deliberately, his shoes crunching on the gravel path. He didn't run. He didn't look back. He just kept walking until he disappeared behind the trees. Anne and I sat frozen for what felt like forever. Finally, she let out a shaky breath. You need to get out of that house. I can't, I whispered. All my things are there. My laptop, my ID, everything. Leave it, she said. Pack what matters and go. Tonight. By the time I got back, the sun was setting. The house looked normal. Too normal. Bathed in orange light, the porch swing rocking lazily in the breeze. I half expected him to be waiting by the door, but the driveway was empty. His car was gone. I stepped inside, every muscle tense. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and coffee. Familiar, comforting, almost enough to trick me into thinking nothing had changed. Then I saw the envelope on the kitchen table. Name was written on it in Mark's handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was taken from upstairs, from our bedroom window by the angle of it. The photo showed me sitting on the porch that morning, coffee mug in hand, smiling at something off camera. Underneath, in the same looping script that had labeled all the others, was one phrase, "You're next." I grabbed my keys and ran. I didn't even lock the door behind me. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped the car key twice before getting it into into the ignition. As I pulled out of the driveway, my headlights caught something at the edge of the yard, a figure standing just beyond the fence line. For a second, I thought it was Mark, but when I looked closer, my blood ran cold. It wasn't him, it was a woman. Her clothes were torn, her skin pale, her hair long and matted. She looked exactly like the woman in the original photo, Claire. She lifted her hand slowly, pointing toward the house. And then, as I blinked, she was gone. I didn't stop driving until I reached Anne's house. I parked half on the lawn and stumbled to the door, pounding until she opened it. She took one look at me and pulled me inside. What happened? I handed her the Polaroid. She stared at it for a long moment, then at me. We need to end this, she said. How? She went to a drawer and pulled out a small flash drive. Claire mailed this to me 2 days before she died. I never looked at it, too scared, I guess. But if we're going to stop him, we need to see what's on it. We plugged it into her laptop. There was only one file, labeled Final Recording. Anne clicked it. The screen flickered. A shaky video began. Shot on a phone, low light, a woman's voice whispering. It was Claire. Her face filled the screen, pale, terrified. If anyone finds this, please don't let him get away with it again. He thinks the fire will erase everything. It won't. He told me I could never leave. That if I tried, he'd make sure no one believed me. He said he'd start over. He always starts over. The screen glitched, her face distorting for a second. Then she whispered one last sentence before the video cut off. He already found her. The next one. Her name is Erin. The screen went black. Anne turned to me, her face ashen. She recorded that before she died. I stared at the laptop, every nerve in my body screaming. He planned this, I said slowly. He picked me because I look like her. Anne nodded grimly. And he won't stop until the story ends the same way. A knock came at the door. Loud, sudden. We both froze. Anne mouthed, "Don't move." The knock came again, harder this time. Then a voice, calm, familiar. "Erin, open the door." It was Mark. "Let's go home," he said softly. "It's getting late." Anne mouthed, "Don't answer." Her hands trembled as she reached to mute the laptop. The last flicker of Claire's frozen face still glowing faintly on the screen. The knock came again, slower now. 3 taps, pause. 3 taps, pause. Like a rhythm he'd practiced. "Erin," Mark's voice came, patient, measured. "You're scared, I know. But you're with someone who wants to hurt me. Hurt us. Please, just open the door so we can talk." Anne grabbed my wrist, whispering, "Don't listen. He's trying to get inside your head. That's what he does." But Mark's tone softened, weaving through the cracks in the wood. "You don't have to hide. You're not safe there. She's been feeding you lies since the day she called. She's the one who set that fire, Erin, not me." My pulse pounded in my ears. Not me. The words were so familiar. He'd said them before, during small arguments, when something went missing, when I caught him in half-truths. He always said them the same way. Calm, certain, gentle enough to sound like love. Anne pressed her finger to her lips, mouthing window. Now. We moved quietly toward the back of the house. But as soon as my foot touched the hallway, the front door handle twisted. "Anne," Mark called, his voice dropping lower, colder. "If you don't open this door, I'll call the police and tell them you kidnapped my fiancé." Anne froze. "He can't do that," I whispered. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw it in her eyes. Doubt. "He's done worse," she murmured. The handle rattled once, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. Anne motioned for me to keep moving. We crept down the hall to the back door, but when I turned the knob, it didn't budge. The deadbolt was locked from the outside. Anne's face went pale. He must have... A crash cut her off. Glass shattering from the living room. Mark was inside. We bolted for the stairs. Anne shoved me ahead of her, slamming the door to the kitchen behind us. Upstairs, we ran, our footsteps pounding against the old wood. I could hear him below, calm as ever. "Erin, please don't make this harder. We just need to go home. You're confused. You don't belong here." I reached the top of the stairs, heart hammering. "And the attic?" She shook her head. "He'll corner us there." "The bathroom. Go." We ducked inside, locking the door. I pressed my back against the wall, shaking so badly I could barely stand. Anne pulled her phone from her pocket, hands trembling, and dialed 911. "Police?" she whispered. "Please, my name is Anne Carter. My ex-brother-in-law broke into my house." She didn't finish. A bang rattled the door. "Anne," Mark said softly through the wood, "you've been telling stories for years. You know, no one's going to believe you." Bang. The door frame cracked. "Erin," he said again, "open the door and we can leave this place. I can explain everything. I can prove she's lying." Bang. The top hinge tore loose. Anne clutched my hand. "If anything happens," she whispered, "run. Don't stop." The next bang sent the door flying open. Mark stepped inside, his face calm, almost gentle, but his eyes, those soft gray eyes I'd once trusted, were flat and empty. "Anne," he said, "you really should have let this go." She stepped between us. "You killed her," she spat. "You killed Claire." Mark's expression didn't change. She was going to ruin everything. "You know how hard I worked to build a life for us?" She wanted to burn it all down. "You lit the fire," Anne said. He sighed. "It doesn't matter who struck the match. It's over." Then his gaze shifted to me. His voice softened. "Erin, come here." I shook my head. "Please," he said. "You don't understand what she's done. What they've done. She wants to take you from me, just like Claire did." Anne's voice trembled. "You said that to her too, didn't you?" "Right before you..." Mark lunged. He grabbed Anne's wrist, twisting hard. She screamed, dropping her phone. It skittered across the tile toward me. "Call," she shouted. "Call the police." I dove for it, fingers slipping. Mark turned, eyes wild now. "Erin, don't..." Before I could hit send, Anne swung a metal shower rod, slamming it across his shoulder. He staggered, the fury in his face exploding into something feral. "Run!" she yelled. I bolted past him, down the stairs, the world narrowing to the sound of my heartbeat. Behind me, I heard Anne scream again, a crash, and then silence. I didn't look back. Outside, the night was thick with fog. I ran barefoot across the grass, cutting my feet on gravel, fumbling for the car. The keys were still in my pocket. I jammed them into the ignition and tore down the road, shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. In the rearview mirror, Anne's house was a shrinking silhouette, dark except for one flickering light upstairs. Then something impossible, a flash of orange. Flame. flames. They licked up through the windows, bright against the night sky. My scream caught in my throat. Not again, I whispered. Oh God, not again. The fire spread fast, too fast. By the time I turned the car around, the whole roof was glowing. I stumbled out, running toward it, but the heat drove me back. Anne! I screamed. Anne! No answer. A shape appeared in the doorway, tall, steady, walking out through the smoke. Mark. His shirt was singed, his face streaked with soot. He was holding something in his hand, the flash drive. He looked at me across the flames, his expression eerily calm. She did it again, he said softly. She tried to burn us both. Where's Anne? I shouted. He tilted his head, almost sympathetic. Gone. She couldn't let go of the past. You said it, I said. You burned it down, just like before. He smiled faintly. You'll understand soon. It's the only way to start over. Then he dropped the flash drive into the fire. The plastic hurled, melted, vanished. I backed away, trembling, my body screaming for motion, but my mind frozen. He stepped closer, eyes reflecting the flames. It's okay, Aaron. We'll leave tonight. We'll disappear. Just you and me. I shook my head. I'm not going anywhere with you. He reached for me. Yes, you are. And then, behind him, movement. For a split second, I thought it was Anne, but the figure that emerged from the fire wasn't alive. It was Claire, or something that looked like her. Her dress was burned, her hair streaked with ash, her skin pale and ghostly in the orange light, her eyes fixed on Mark, unblinking. He froze, his hand still outstretched. Claire, he whispered. She stepped closer, her voice a rasp that cut through the crackle of burning wood. You promised me, she said. Mark stumbled back. No, you're dead. The fire roared louder, swallowing his words. Claire reached for him, and for one impossible heartbeat, her hand brushed his cheek. Then the flames surged. The house exploded in a burst of light and sound that threw me backward into the grass. When I woke, the sky was gray with dawn. Smoke hung heavy in the air. The house was gone, nothing left but charred wood and the blackened skeleton of the porch. They never found Mark's body. The firefighters said the blaze was too hot, too fast. The official report called it accidental ignition from electrical fault, just like last time. Anne's remains were found near the kitchen, clutching her phone. The final message she'd typed but never sent was to me. You were right, it was him. But Claire didn't die in that fire. She waited. It's been 3 months. I moved 3 states away. I don't tell people my real last name anymore, but some nights, when I wake to the smell of smoke that isn't there, I swear I can hear a woman's voice whispering from the corner of the room. He always starts over. And once, just once, when I looked out my window at dawn, I saw a figure standing across the street. A woman. Her hair long, her smile soft. She lifted her hand not to wave, but to point behind me, toward the house I now live in. When I turned back, she was gone. On the porch the next morning, I found a single Polaroid lying face down on the steps. When I flipped it over, my breath caught. It was me again, asleep in my own bed, taken through the window. And beneath it, written in looping familiar ink, Mrs. Carter.